Coming out of executive session, John, please proceed as we just discussed.
I will. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. Okay, we are now at item number 6. Action item number 6. It's going to be presenting Kevin Moriarty, please.
Yeah, good afternoon. For the record, Kevin Moriarty, County Forester. I'm here today for the grant that we just recently applied for through the Oregon State Fire Marshal Community Wildfire Risk Reduction Program. So I had worked on this grant with Christy Bollinger with Property Management and Sergeant Garraby with the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office, and then also the City of Bend and COID. And so I'm here today asking for approval of the grant application for the Oregon Department of State Fire Marshal's Office, and then also move approval to accept, if awarded, the grant funding from the Oregon Department of State Fire Marshal's Office. Juniper Ridge area encompasses approximately 1,350 acres of City of Bend and Deschutes County property immediately adjacent to the north end of the City of Bend. This area is primarily underdeveloped, however, borders rural residential areas on the east side, industrial and residential areas on the south side, and US 97 on the west side. The property also has power, fiber, cellular communication, and the Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad and irrigation canal infrastructure that runs through the middle of it. The area also is in close proximity to 3 mobile home parks, which provide housing for persons of lower incomes. The Juniper Ridge area has experienced a significant number of human-caused ignitions, several of which have impacted all the aforementioned infrastructure and caused significant impact to the surrounding community, as well as direct and indirect safety threats. In 2024, there have been 14 wildfire responses and a total of 48 wildfire responses since 2020. Staff proposes to utilize the grant funds to implement ladder fuel reduction on 7 miles of unimproved roads within the Juniper Ridge area and to treat approximately 55 encampment concentrations. The total project area within Juniper Ridge is approximately 305 acres. The route treatment is probably approximately 40 acres, and the encampment treatment is approximately 9 acres. The project area has the highest concentration of encampments in close proximity to portable toilets and wash stations. The project will reduce fire risk to the project area and the areas surrounding it. It will also reduce the hazard risk to first responders. The City of Bend and COID have provided letters of support for the project. Budget impacts. If approved, the application could result in a grant award of $75,000. And if awarded, $67,500 would be used for contracted services, including security services, and the remaining $7,500 would be used for administrative costs and administrating the contracts. Although there is no match required, Deschutes County will be matching $30,000 to improve the county-owned parcel, and the City of Bend has pledged to match $50,000 to expand treatments on the city-owned parcels. So that's essentially a summary of the project that we applied for on the grant, and I'm here to answer any questions at this time.
So these fuels treatments, Kevin, are we talking just about limbing trees up, or is there going to be a reduction in the density of juniper trees as well?
There were primarily the treatment would primarily be limbing and brush removal. We are proposing to treating 6 inches or less trees as well. There's not a lot of small trees out there right now. They're primarily mature, older trees. And so the project would primarily be working on limbing and reducing brush.
Well, looking at the numbers, going to 14 fires already this year, it's been significantly hire, we had 4 years when it was only 34 total. So we've only had half a year and we're talking about spending what, 147,000 actually is gonna get into the project. But you've got it really narrowed down to like 40 acres is what we're gonna be handling at this time. Is that going to be the 40 acres that, I know the county's property is 50 acres? Are you gonna do some of the city property too then?
Yeah, so this grant proposal is primarily gonna be working on routes and treating areas around encampments. We don't really have the funding to treat all the areas. I think with the county property funding, we can do a significant treatment on the county parcel, but on the city parcel, we would probably only be confined to routes and treating encampments. And then the 50,000 match that the city has pledged would probably just be expanding those treatments and potentially doing a treatment of fuel breaks along the borders of the city parcels.
So the accountants are red dotted on here?
The encampments that haven't been proposed in the treatments are red dotted, and then the blue dots are the ones we're proposing for treatments.
Okay, so that is a part of it here, okay. The blue dots are gonna be treated.
Correct.
What kind of timeframe are we talking about in terms of when we'll hear back? When work would start?
Yeah, there wasn't given an exact time frame on when we would hear back. I would guess we'd probably hear back within the next few months. They've been pretty expedient, Oregon State Fire Marshal's office on answering whether applications have received awards or not. If we are awarded, most likely it would be a direct cash award like we've received in the past from other Oregon State Fire Marshal awards. And so we could potentially, once we get a contract together and contractors, we could implement pretty expediently from there. So potentially this fall or winter. I believe the grant goes till 2026, so we would have a little bit of time if there was hiccups along the road to make sure we're, doing the project correctly.
And there's no seasonal considerations on when this work could be implemented.
I mean, just fire restrictions would be the biggest reason to not implement in the summer. And we generally don't try to do fuel reduction projects, when we have higher fire risks. So we primarily try and implement our projects fall, winter, and springtime.
Yeah, one of the reasons I'm asking for the time frame is because I'm trying to think about if we in the long term don't want people to be in this area. How much work do we want to do, to make the area more fire resilient on what time frame? But that's pretty soon, that's pretty prompt, and I'm guessing that it's unlikely that homeless encampments are going to be out of this area before the winter. So there's definite benefit there. I mean, just the fuels reduction work in general, I mean, is beneficial. It's just kind of whether this is the right place for in terms of long-term priorities and considerations to be putting these resources or not. But it seems like an appropriate project on an appropriate timeline.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Chang. And also just note on that, when I worked with Sergeant Garabee on this, we're looking at the area with the highest concentration of encampments to try and focus on that area. And, potentially trying to keep that area intact where you have encampments outside of there where we would try to treat, but I think the encouragement of working within that area would be, our kind of the values that Sergeant Garabee and I are trying to, instill in the project.
As vegetation management, would it be appropriate to try to remove more whole junipers? I'm saying we're limiting them up, but then we're still gonna have these trees there, and I just wonder what's the value, blowing the wind through there, or, not that we would want to cut them all down, or just what would a healthy state be out there, I guess.
I think, on the county property where we have a little more levity of what we could accomplish and a little more funding, we could potentially be removing a lot more of the larger trees in that area, but you know, realistically, it would be pretty difficult to remove whole junipers and reduce fire risk
Yeah.
on that side.
But yeah, removing whole junipers would be a future step. I'm just saying it'd be
Yeah.
appropriate to remove more.
Correct, yeah,
That's what.
yeah.
Okay. Well, I'm supportive. Obviously, it's a good opportunity to, receive some dollars and partner with the city and be able to reduce the hazard and open it up a little bit. I move approval of a grant application to the Oregon Department of the State Fire Marshal for funds to be used for the community wildfire risk reduction.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
Move approval to accept, if awarded, grant funding from the Oregon Department of the State Fire Marshal for community wildfire risk reduction efforts.
I'll second it.
Is there any further discussion?
That's just so if you get the money, you don't have to come back to another board meeting and schedule it out.
So it looks like a neighborhood of maybe 47, 50 camps that you're cleaning up?
Yes,
Okay, I
Yeah.
did try it. All right, so calling for the vote, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. So please let us know when how soon this is gonna happen, because hopefully the state will come through sooner rather than later.
okay, all right, thank you for your time.
Yeah, I could just ask one final question. So in terms of neighbors to the city and county property who were vulnerable to fire coming off these properties and endangering them. Yeah, are these the best locations for us to be doing this work on the city and county property? Yeah, basically to be a good neighbor.
I think so, because it has the highest concentration of encampments and where basically all the wildfires have been started. So that's where we're really trying to treat that area to reduce that chance of going on to other properties. On the county property, the idea would be to focus on the southern end of the county property outside of this grant to do treatments to really protect a lot of the neighbors out there. And then the proposal would be on city property to use some of that pledged funding to implement a fuel break on the south and east sides of the city property, so we would have neighbors as well. And while trying to, promote the concentrated area as a suitable area.
Great, thank you.
Okay, item number 7.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm Eric Croft, Deputy County Administrator. This item is talking about something that the county has actually been working on for over 20 years. And that is a land exchange with the Department of State Lands. The Department of State Lands owns acres south of the Fair and Expo Center that the county would like to acquire. The county has been working with Department of State Lands on the land swap and is offering 137 acres in southeast Redmond. As the board is aware, things are moving forward. And then in the spring of 2023, the Department of State Lands sent the county a letter saying that the land swap, that the state would not move forward with the land swap while people were living on the county-owned land and that there was debris on the county-owned land. At that time, county staff put forward a plan to relocate people from the county-owned 137 acres. That plan was paused for a couple of reasons. Number one, the issue of Juniper Ridge came up with people camping on county-owned land in Juniper Ridge and the code enforcement complaint and notice. Also, there were several projects in Redmond that would add capacity to the Redmond community for beds. So we heard from certain Redmond service providers about potentially pausing the relocation. And also there was concern about not having an alternative location for the people. The board heard from County Council Dave Goyle last week about the need to have an alternative location for people to go based on Oregon state law and some other things. So that plan to relocate people was paused, and we're back here to revisit this plan. I want to point out that the relocation plan really contemplates about a 9-10 month process after the alternative location is ready for people to relocate to. Property manager Christy Bollinger put together an extensive plan on how, in terms of notification and how people would be relocated. But it's important to note that that's after the alternative location has been identified and is ready. This is a map that property put together. There's actually a better map that I wish I would have put in instead. But essentially, the area in light blue is just unincorporated county. And then the 137 acres, I'm actually gonna go up to the screen, easier. The 137 acres that the county owns is this piece here and comes down here. And then the 45 acres where we're proposing where people could go is this piece right here. And then Oasis Village is right here.
Eric, I think there's a better map in their packets.
There might be, this is a better map, it's not in the presentation, but. Okay, yeah.
We got this one in our packet.
Okay, so the packet one has a better map. First, I want to talk about the Redmond Continuum of Services. This was actually put together by James Cook. And I included it in the presentation with his approval. But what this chart shows is kind of the gaps in the continuum of services. Oftentimes, when we talk about the housing continuum of services, it goes from shelter into supportive housing. But this really further breaks down people that are not in shelter yet. So it starts with the far left, what we're seeing, unsanctioned camping. And then the next step up is sanctioned camping, or kind of like a supported camp. The next one would be a managed camp. Then emergency shelter, low barrier shelter, high barrier transitional housing, assisted living, subsidized supported housing, permanent supported housing, and then affordable housing. And what this table identifies as in red is what Redmond is lacking. And today what we're talking about is the two left columns, sanctioned camping or managed camps. And we'll talk a little bit more about what those mean. The city of Redmond passed a city code that talks about supported shelter standards. And this is a list of what is required for a supported or a managed camp. This Redmond code applies to the 45 acres. The 45 acres is within the city of Redmond city limits. The Redmond code says that there can't be open flames unless it's in an RV that is titled and registered. The Redmond city code says that a supported or managed camp must have fencing that is 6 feet high and is screened from sight. There is a provision for deviations from this requirement with approval from the Redmond Community Development Director. And then there must be some on-site presence. The responsible entity must be able to accept and to respond to calls during business hours. They also must designate somebody to respond to after-hour emergencies. There shall be a code of conduct.
Eric, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but the prior slide does not have the Bethlehem in it anywhere that the county put in 900,000. And I'm not exactly sure where it would go if it's high
I think
barrier.
it's under Birch Sober Living.
Oh,
that I support.
Birch,
Yeah,
that's right, that's the street name for the little street, yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
or that's also the name, the Bethlehem Inn.
But is it only sober? And can you be drugs too, to be there?
I don't know. Not sure.
It's high barrier.
Yeah,
Okay, because I keep hearing from people driving by that there's nobody there. I mean, relatively speaking. Okay, thank you.
going back to the on-site presence, there also needs to be some types of services the Redmond City Code talks about somebody who can assist residents in obtaining necessary documents. The idea is that there's some type of case management services that would help people get out of homelessness and do some type of housing. So these are the requirements from the Redmond City Code. Staff first put together kind of the purpose or goals of this project. Oftentimes when these types of projects, people have different ideas and really what's the purpose. So we wanted to identify what we see as the draft goals. Number one is to provide an alternative location for people to live that has basic hygiene supports on the county 45 acres. We, of course, need to comply with House Bill 3115, the state law that talks about relocating people who are homeless. Number three is I call it cascading goals because, the ideal situation is a person moves out of homelessness. That's a best case scenario. That's not going to happen in every scenario. So the next best is for somebody to move to the supported or managed camp. And then if that's not available, or if they choose not to go there, because we can't force people to go to a supported or managed camp. The next best scenario is the person would move off of the 137 acres onto other parts of the county 45 acres. Another goal is we need to ensure that there's access for emergency response vehicles. Goal number 5 is to relocate people from the 137 down to the 45. And then we want to be careful to minimize the impact on Oasis Village. County staff worked with City of Redmond staff to talk about different ideas and different concepts. I'm going to go over three main concepts. They start out with kind of a basic level of services, and then they move up from there. There could also be more than the 3 concepts. But concept number 1 is basically what we're doing at Juniper Ridge, but with some case management services. So under concept number 1, there would be portable toilets, potable water, hand washing stations, dumpsters. There would be security patrols. We would hire a nonprofit to provide the case management services. Again, we want to get people out of homelessness, and so the case management services is very important and complies with the City of Redmond Code. We would need to determine who would respond to the calls both during the day and during off hours. And then under concept number 1, we would request from the City of Redmond to waive the fencing requirement. That's not a given. We would have to request it and it would have to be approved. And the reason why concept 1 doesn't have the fence is that if you put up a fence, then there needs to be pretty much 24/7 supervision. And with concept number 1, there isn't 24/7 supervision. There is a mobile case management, but that's why this concept does not include the fence. So then the next step up is what's called basic campsites and a camp host model. It would have all the same elements of concept number 1. Under this model, there would be a 6-foot fence. There would likely just be one entry point rather than a gate, because if you fence it in with a gate, you've got to have somebody being able to open and close it. Under concept number 2, there would be designated sites for people to move to. Think of it as kind of a primitive camp. A nonprofit would hopefully hire a camp host to live there. The camp host would ensure that the general rules are followed, or the basic code of conduct, which is required by Redmond Code. The camp host would call 911 if necessary. And the nonprofit or the camp host would be responsible for calls during the business hours or off hours. Or the nonprofit or the security firm could respond to after-hour emergency calls.
Will our security firms now respond if there's a call on Juniper Ridge at 10 at night?
No, that would be we would tell people to call 911.
They call 911.
Yes.
Okay.
And then, so concept number 2 is more a supported camp with some supervision. And then concept 3 is more of a what people would think of as a managed camp. So that again has all the same elements of concept number 1. We would hire a nonprofit to staff the managed camp. The number of hours would be determined. Obviously, the more hours that a staff person is there, the higher cost. The nonprofit may use a camp host model. And then the nonprofit would be responsible for the calls during the business hours and after hour calls as well. Possible next steps, and before I talk about that, I just want to reiterate that when the Coordinated Houseless Response Office put out the RFQ, identified property that was owned by public entities, we did not get any specific proposals for this land, the 45 acres in southeast Redmond. So part of the difficulty on this is we have not had a nonprofit step forward to say they want to partner with us in this effort. There has been some, we've all had some conversations with different nonprofits. What I've heard is that many nonprofits don't have the capacity or are willing to take over a managed camp. There's potential difficulties in getting insurance. I have heard some possible interest in doing mobile case management. That's part of concept number 1, and possibly 2. But in terms of next steps, we see the board could direct staff to issue an RFP for these potential services. There's a long list of the potential services. I would like to note that items A through E are items that the county currently provides through contractors at Juniper Ridge. And so for A through E, if the board approved it, we could move forward with county staff working directly with contractors to provide the potable water, the trash dumpsters, security, hand washing stations, and portable toilets. And then F through K would be more for to gauge interest from nonprofits. Item F is really for if somebody wants to move from the 137 down to the 45 and needs assistance. That's what that identifies is that the nonprofit could help the person relocate their stuff and belongings. Another possible next step is rather than doing this broad RFP is a phased-in approach. So under this arrangement, county staff would implement concept number 1. We would need to get a nonprofit to do the mobile case management, but we would have the 45 acres identified. We would identify a date when people need to relocate. We would put out the basic hygiene supports, get the mobile case management going. Again, that would need approval from the city of Redmond because we would not be putting up a fence at that point. But we would implement concept number 1, and then we can work towards implementing concepts 2 or 3. So it's a phased-in approach. We would also need to meet with the city of Redmond, Sheriff's Office, and the District Attorney's Office to talk about enforcement, to make sure that all parties were agreeable that if we identified the alternative location, we gave people a date, and if somebody refused to move off of the 137 acres, to make sure that we had a process to enforce that. We have had preliminary discussions with the Sheriff's Office and the DA's office a number of months ago, but we want to sit down and map out a process and make sure that we knew whether or not it was going to be the Sheriff's Office or Redmond PD that would respond, and make sure that we had that nailed down.
Eric, I do have questions about this idea of doing concept 1 and then phasing towards concept 2 or 3. As far as I understand, the people who are living in the 137 acres, who we want not to be living in the 137 acres right now, are not in the 45 acres.
That's correct.
So I think there's basic, and I'm looking at Christie on this as well. I mean, I have basic questions about whether there's a network of dirt roads and spots for people to just move to under concept one. If we kind of said, you know, go ahead, we'll put some sanitation services out around the 45 acres and you can just set up wherever you like. While with concept two, I mean, we were talking about designated sites. I think there would probably, you know, there could be like some grading of certain areas to, you know, to have people a little bit more concentrated. You know, a real managed camp. So I actually have a lot of questions about whether, you know, whether you could ask people to leave the 137 acres and go just kind of find someplace in the 45 acres and then get them into a kind of more, you know, developed site later on for a concept two, or whether we would need to, you know, jump either from where we are all the way to concept two, or, you know, just go to concept one and just wherever people end up settling themselves, we just accept that and we kind of support that where it is. Does my concern, you know?
Yeah, it's valid, and you know, with concept number two, we kind of pictured in terms of location where we would put up either a supported camp or a managed camp. From Oasis Village, if you go north, there's a little bit of an incline, and then there's, I don't know, if it's an outcropping or there's a little bit of a higher area. Just behind there would be probably the location for a supported or managed camp, because we would have access. And you need to make sure that you have emergency vehicle access, and with 21st Street.
Yes.
Going north from the highway, that would probably be the location. But in terms of people accessing dirt roads from the 137 to 45, do you have any comments, Christie, on?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. For the record, Christy Bollinger, Deschutes County Property Management. So there is a number of road networks in there, and there's actually a number of people already living on the 45 acres. So if we were gonna go in there and do something grander in terms of grading, we would have to probably clear the site completely. So if we sort of basically said you can be in this area, but you can't be on the 137, for example, I think the disruption would be a lot less to folks in general. Like
to
the
allow people to
existing-
basically just disperse across the 45 acres.
Yeah, kind of,
Instead of developing.
yeah, exactly. And I think the timing too. So it depends on how quickly the board wants to act on this, because if we were gonna go in there, do some sort of level of grading, you know, we'd have to do a notice period to remove the folks that are already on the 45 acres. And then go in and do the planning, do the grading, or whatever that looks like. So that's gonna be a level of time too. So I think all depends on what the board would like to see in terms of timing.
I mean,
Okay, so I was, oh, go ahead.
I have concerns about being able to effectively provide supportive services, case management, have rules, enforce rules if people are kind of dispersed across the whole 45 acres as opposed to, you know, concentrated in some more developed areas. Possibly even fenced, you know, like there may be, you know, in other places where I've heard about managed camps, people are actually happy to be inside the fence. You know, they want the fence because it, you know, it makes them feel safe at night that they are inside the fence. I you know, maybe this is a Janice and Eric question, but I mean, you know, how can we provide case management, provide supportive services, you know, have rules and enforce rules when people are dispersed across the whole 45 acres?
Yeah, what I would see is the mobile case management would be the comfort level of the person at the nonprofit. At Juniper Ridge, there's currently services being provided. There are some camps that that those services aren't welcome and the nonprofit or even our county staff don't go there to those camps. So I see it very similar where the mobile case management would be for everybody there, but not everybody would accept those services. In terms of the code of conduct and rules, I kind of see it start with pretty basic where the code of conducts are follow city, county regulations. No human waste into the ground and things like that. And that could be enforced by our security contractor.
Yeah, I think whether there's a fence or not, I think there's still gonna be a level of enforcement. If we have, the commissioner's support to do that, we can absolutely work with the service provider to ensure that that's in compliance. I don't know that a fence really makes that.
The fence makes a huge difference because, as Commissioner Chang just said, people feel safer inside the fence, and I totally agree with that. And talking to Rick Russell last week, Rick said if there's any way we can provide electricity, which is way over the top from what we've normally done, but he says people will follow the rules in order to have electricity. So I don't know, I called Central Electric to see if they could work out some kind of deal with the county because this is so impacting the east side of Redmond with all the homeless camps that are out there and all the fires and everything that we've been dealing with. So I just feel like 8 or 9 acres, it's 25 camps per acre. So if we did 8 acres and 9 acres, we don't need to have them go to 45 and a free for all. I think we should just start at concept number 2. And then the other thing that Russell mentioned was law enforcement. You've got to feel safe, and his board, in order for him to actually do the work, they want to feel safe. And that, therefore, I go back to what's going on in Lane County, and they're using law enforcement as far as their team goes, that pilot project where they're successful in 90 days, getting people to move on to housing. So, we're dealing with people that have probably been out there longer than what they were dealing with, but honestly, Rick said he's got to have, the guarantee that law enforcement will be part of the team because his people want to feel safe. And, driving around Juniper, you can see the signs that say, keep out, there's places where you don't drive into.
I think we also need to think, we need to ask ourselves what our goal is. If our goal is to maintain people essentially in unauthorized encampments, not necessarily not necessarily taking steps out of homelessness, then, doing the minimum is, doing the minimum probably works. I mean, just having people scattered across the 45 acres is not so different than having people scattered across the 137 acres. But if we want people to be moving out of homelessness, to reintegrate into society, to kind of have a code of conduct that they're following, to have some kind of communal experience with other people, I think we need to invest a little bit more in the development of kind of more concentrated locations. But that's just my perspective.
I mean, there was a reason why Redmond made the fenced rule in there. And I don't believe that we should ask for nothing, oh, and we don't want fencing. No, I think we do want fencing because I think the people we talk into moving into that will want it. You want to feel safe.
And it will cost money to do, to go to concept 2 or concept 3, but again, the question is what is our goal? I mean, if essentially we want to warehouse people in homelessness, then concept number 1, I think, is probably adequate. But if we actually want people to be moving out of homelessness, then I think we need to look at the other 2 options.
To remind the room, the program in Lane County in 90 days was successful 88% of the time. It was a small pilot, like 30, but incredibly successful because they were with them 4 days out of 7 days every week. And that is what makes the difference, getting them the help they need. And, it doesn't work for everyone. I mean, just talking to Oasis Village, not everyone that qualifies for Oasis Village is successful, or even maybe the Veterans Village, but because they're surrounded by so much help. If there is a chance to be successful, they will find it there. It's a positive.
And we're happy to put out the RFP for concept number 2. You know, part of the idea of concept number 1 is if we don't get a service provider that is willing to do concept 2, that's possible plan B.
I mean, to circle back to the discussion we had with the Redmond City Council a couple months ago, Councilor Zwicker predicted, I don't think we're gonna get any responses. I think it would be a lot easier to put out an RFP for someone to operate a site than for someone to design, build, and operate a site. So I mean, that could be an option for the way that we pursue this is seek essentially put out an RFP for the operation of concept number 2 and just accept that we, hopefully with the partnership with the city of Redmond, we would be on the hook for developing the site. And it could be, that sounds like a big word, but it could be as simple as, some grading, some fencing and, and all the stuff we were planning on anyway, porta potties and water tanks and things like that.
And I do want to thank Taylor Northwest on the record. They're actually providing a couple dump truckloads full of medium boulders for Oasis Village for their sound issues and to give them space against Highway 126. So thank you, Taylor Northwest, for stepping up and providing that. And maybe there's someone else in the community that would help provide us with gravel. I mean, it's such a huge problem. The fires are, as we've seen, this 24 fires, Juniper Ridge. That's awful.
So the phased in approach as presented, implementing concept 1 is something that I would support. Setting up an opportunity for people to live in a sanctioned camp. Remember that, James Cook did a great job laying this out, a sanctioned camp. You're allowed to be here. It's a more long-term opportunity. You're gonna be offered services. We want to help you move up this whole continuum and this ladder of opportunities in support of economic development for the east side of Redmond, in support of the fairgrounds. Taking a big chunk to try to do this second concept just seems like a big step. Commissioner, you mentioned, people feel comfortable in the fence. People that want to be in the fence go to be in the fence, but this isn't everybody out there. So I still kind of think of this, we have 100% problem and we're going to take bites of it, but we're still not trying to work with this whole solution. We're just going to take bites out of it and it's going to be very expensive. Fine, let's help people that want help, but we're still not even leaning into taking care of business for 137 acres for a fairground swap and economic development opportunities on the east side of Redmond. So, I could see the sensitivity of this issue. I would definitely support implementing these steps in 1, 2, 3.
Again, I think it's not, well, once you've gotten someone to pick up and move out 137 acres into a very dispersed location in the 45 acres, I don't see that. I don't think it's going to be very easy to get them to move somewhere else in the 45 acres. And
So that's very.
I frankly, I just don't think it's, I don't think it's safe. I mean, I do, the people dispersed across a very large area, with not a whole lot of line of sight around, is, real challenges with reaching people to enforce a code of conduct, I think is a risk. I think it's very risky. And I think if we have blessed that, that dispersed pattern of camping out there, that we are actually really responsible for it. You know, when people are out on the 137 acres, you know, we never said, you know, that's your place to go. They're there because, we haven't chased them out of there. But if we say, you know, like 45 acres, you know, it's all yours. And we are not able to keep track of people, we're not able to see if rules are being violated. I think it's dangerous.
Christy, how many people do you think are living on the 45 right now? Do we know?
We were just out there a couple weeks ago. Concentration wasn't too large, but maybe 10 encampments. Yeah, it's hard to know how many people within the encampments because they typically don't show themselves when we're out there, but
So why doesn't somebody take a drone over and count?
Yeah.
I mean, you know.
we've got the encampment number, we just don't have the individual.
Okay, so we don't have the individual. So we know there's 10 encampments there, and how many are on the 137 then?
We didn't drive that whole thing. I have it lined up with the sheriff's office to do a drone.
Yeah, I mean,
flyover.
that would
just
to
haven't-
me be the smartest thing. Okay, so we have, you know, 10 encampments and we can have 25 per acre, then definitely they may have to. I just feel like gotta have rules.
And then part of the thing we have to work through too with whoever the service provider might be, you know, providing services out there is how many folks per, you know, how big should their spaces be? Because these people aren't used to being,
Yep.
you know, high density, right? So we've got to figure out what does that look like, and we don't know that yet at all.
I mean, we're not talking like a KOA campground, but, you can have some space, but you can also have everybody within kind of clear line of sight as well. And there's, you know, within whatever is kind of you know, acceptable to people's sensibilities, you know, every square foot that we grade, every linear foot of fence that we put in, I mean, that adds to the cost, so like there has to be some balance point between kind of providing people with, you know, like a human amount of space, but also you know, doing this as efficiently as possible.
Cost effective as possible. I actually had a call on Saturday from someone and he called, I asked him to send me an email on it, but he called some of the different providers in our community. And he said, Patty, they all have room. They all have room for these people. You guys keep doing more and more and more. And of course, are they gonna go to the Birch facility? Probably not, but definitely, you know, our fire danger is way too high. And it's time that we do something.
Well,
After 20 years of trying to get this property swapped.
I think this has been laid out for us wonderfully, and, you know, we do go, discuss a lot of aspects here. To say implementing concept one is gonna be done in the full light of our community, service providers, city of Redmond, in partnership with the, county. And working towards concept 2 and 3. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like I'm repeating myself, but I mean, I sure hope there would be support for this, as I say, giving people clear direction of where we're gonna go, because if we go to concept 2, we're gonna be asking some, you know, the community, somebody to respond about, okay, we have a need here, who's gonna step up to fill this need, and then it's gonna boil down to dollars. Then we're gonna be asked to fund something extra here. So as I say, and that's probably the future also. But how about we try this step one?
I actually believe that we need to actually do something. And I'm really tired of just handing people water every Monday or every Wednesday. That's not it. That's not solving our issues. And so I feel like concept 2, we've been doing concept 1 in Juniper. Let's just take everything and start with concept 2, and we've got to make progress. So, you know, do we still have the chop house over in Juniper? So is the chop house still there? Yeah, it's still there. Yeah.
So just for clarity, we haven't technically been fully doing this concept one at Juniper Ridge. We haven't really had full case management that's contracted, you know, we have service providers that do go out there, but this
We
would
have
be a
service,
different.
we have a whole bunch of service providers, because I'm hearing from them and what they're doing, but it's not that 4 days a week continuity that made the difference for the Lane County plan. It was honestly, it's the continuity, and they weren't every day, but they were at least 4 days a week. So, I would like to be able to make progress.
Um. Would it be, can we have the city of Redmond join us at the table and just share some perspectives on what they think is feasible and or what they think is feasible, what the city might or might not be willing to partner with us on, what you know, if there are any preferences of what those might look like.
Sure, Keith Witkowski, Redmond City Manager.
Linda Klein, housing coordinator for City of Redmond.
So what I've heard from my council so far is we've talked about this with the county for a long time, which you'll be talking about again in mid-October at a joint meeting. Is definitely having something that's structured, having, you know, whether it's the gravelled in paths, having fencing, not using the entire 45 acres and moving more towards a concept 2 than a concept 1. You know, we want to create something that's safe and secure for the people that are going to be servicing it, for the people that are going to be living out there. And that's where the structure comes in, so that ideally we can come up with a model that can be replicated in other places as well.
Linda, did you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, the concerns with the concept one, for me at least, is the code of conduct is a real issue with that. If you're just asking people to disperse. Leave one area where they're dispersed to go to another area where they're dispersed. I don't know how you control whether they have campfires out there. If they're following the rules. Also our 25 units per acre. Commissioner Adair, you brought that up, and that would be a real concern with that too, because if it's not fenced, if it's just people moving as they want, we really don't have control of density in that way either. So I think those are two things right off the bat that concept one lacks in clarity.
Well, good. So it's nice to hear he's saying the same thing, that, yeah, concept 2. I mean, it's about time that we do something that really will help make the Redmond Airport safer, and we won't have to be diverting flights.
Yeah, and I think as we go forward with this, right, we'll have to see what the resources are to make it happen that way. You know, met with the mayor this morning. He was very clear that we want to do what we can to help pave the way for the land exchange next year. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for some productive conversations over the next few months as we work towards these things, and then we can start making more qualitative decisions.
He didn't say like, we have $1 million to help with this or anything like that.
Actually, you know, hang on.
Did you have a check?
Back pocket.
Yes. Oh, come on,
So-
Keith. No, I mean, but that's great. That's, if we can work together on this and, you know, actually make progress.
Yeah, and we're putting, as you know, I'm just kind of saying it for the record, right? The council's putting in the $750,000 to help towards the infrastructure for the road, that'll help both Core 3 in this, but there's a lot of pieces that need to get unpacked and understood and taken care of.
What do you guys think about that electricity concept, though? That's something Rick told me last week. He said, you know, Patty, if we can offer electricity, that is such a outstanding negotiating bargain with people, you know, to get them move in, and hey, you'll have electricity here. Is it really expensive? I mean, how far away is electricity? from that?
I mean, right
From
now,
the
the power's
45
run
acres.
to Oasis.
Oasis Village,
Right,
and there's
so-
power up north up at Antler as well. There was talking to Pacific Power, they would recommend bringing it up from Oasis Village.
From Oasis? Okay, how far would that be?
The distance?
Yeah.
I don't know exact distance, but we just have
Like
to work.
2 miles or a quarter of a
The-
mile?
The clearing of 21st Street is about 600 feet. So, right, and that's supposed to get us to some of the areas on the 45 acres. So if you think about that as a rough number.
And I've heard that from multiple service providers as well as Rick, that electricity would really be.
Right, that would be,
a wonderful enticement to get
Yes.
people to wanna seek a different life.
And that's beyond the kind of, I mean, I've seen a couple of safe parking sites. You know, like a little solar setup, and so people are wanting, you know, to plug their RV in, not just to charge their phone. Is that what you're?
Ideally, yeah. If they're gonna seek to live in a different place and have some different controls on them, kind of what do they gain? And electricity would be a huge gain.
Huge. I mean, 20 years is a long time to wait, isn't it, for this land exchange?
So, Keith, what about 17th Street folks that are just kind of right there at the edge of the road and, right off the road? Do you see, is this the same group of people?
In terms of the population who would go on to the 45 acres.
Yeah, just. Cause I mean, I think of the folks that are in the Junipers that are, okay, there's, but then there's people right there, a little bit more, hopefully mobile, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, ideally.
Is
I
this
don't know
one
if I-
problem or two?
I don't know if I'm answering your question, but I know
Is this
this
one problem or two?
I mean, I think the populations are probably mixed, right?
Mixed,
But
yeah, I don't think.
So we think of it as two populations?
I mean, I'm not a service provider, so I can only speak from a pretty high policy level. I know that 17th Street, right, has been something that's similar to Hunnell Road here a while ago, that the really important industries in Redmond have been tolerating and managing for a number of years as well. And trying to find solutions that help them also is going to be important.
Yeah, I mean, cause that, I wanna include it, I wanna improve that whole situation, when Wild Mike's Pizza comes to build, I want them to be happy to be able to. Break ground and enjoy making pizza over there, and it's just awkward, for. Service or, companies that are over there right now, just
I
can't
mean,
walk around your building at lunchtime.
world-class
marketing.
companies, midline, it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
you
right.
cannot,
Yeah, Fortune 500, Fortune.
So it's, I think of it as one.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean,
yeah, yeah.
hopefully we're-
It's gonna be,
we've got to
it's gonna be
clean
part
the
of
whole
the
area up.
calculation. It's gonna be important.
I mean, for the 137 acres, the marketability of the 137 acres, 17th is the foreground. I mean, you can't. I mean, that's ultimately our objective for that land. I mean, so you can't just deal with the people who are in the 137 acres and not the people who are on the edge.
And what about your regs? So I was wondering, it said, just having one gate to me wouldn't be safe, just in case something happened at the one gate. Would your code allow to have like a second emergency gate at the other end of the fencing?
I think the purpose really isn't that to limit it to one gate, it's one entrance points to the RV, obviously for fire, we would need more than one gate. I mean,
Okay,
we
I
have to
just-
need fire access for that, but as far as controlling who's coming to go, and so these folks do feel safe.
Right.
What was said earlier, that is true, that folks do wanna know if they are coming in and following rules and doing their thing, that there's some control over who comes and goes and follows the rules or doesn't, so. And a feeling of safety there.
Yes, thank you for that answer.
So now,
One additional question for the city of Redmond. I mean, all of this area is within city limits. And Redmond PD is responding to, to things that are happening on the 137 or the 45 acres. I mean, is it from from law enforcement's perspective, is it better to come to the structured gravel, kind of a little bit more concentrated site, or is it better to be responding to incidents across the 45 acres?
All right, it'd be better to have a smaller area that's got more infrastructure improvements when it comes to gravel versus the kind of situations that exist out there right now.
And I mean, to be able to, most of the reason that people want to follow a code of conduct is because they accept it and they understand that it's better for them. But I mean, there is a certain amount of complaints that comes from seeing law enforcement, and if you have a concentrated area that's pretty, about the closest access of 126 possible. I think it's more likely that we could, people would feel that Redmond PD is likely to respond if something happens. That will shape people's behavior.
Actually, I just remembered Rick Russell did suggest using like a school resource officer, maybe having that kind of a face out, dealing with his, if they can make a proposal. Just having some kind of, safety net so that his team will be, successful. So, I don't know if they wear different clothing when they're the school resource officer or not, but I know like Casey that works in the schools, Casey Carpstein works in the bed schools in the winter, and then in the summer he's out at China, or he was last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's, security out there is gonna be important, so however it's taken care of. Again, another big conversation to have. And what's appropriate.
But I think the safe parking in Redmond has been successful though, hasn't it, Keith?
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe our Redmond PD has been one of their biggest advocates.
Yeah, or she's been out there, it's, talking about it, it's a program that's worked really well. The version that Rick created, you know, taken off the model of Ben's has really succeeded in Redmond, it's been great.
Right.
Right, so to sort of kind of move this conversation forward. Would staff like a motion or?
That would be helpful.
And I'm not quite sure whether we should just ask for. Can you develop concept number 2, or, you know, we're moving that we are pursuing concept number 2, or?
Couple thoughts. One could be direct staff to draft the RFP as concept number 2. There could be an option for service providers to just to actually plan the supported or managed camp, or just to provide the services so that the service providers have the option, see what we get.
If, you know, personally, again, I was persuaded by, you know, Counselor Switter's analysis. I think if we can put out there our request for proposals just to operate, we'd be more likely to succeed, but I want to look to staff and just ask, you know, is it within our capability, you know, or maybe our joint capabilities, city and county, is it within our capability to develop the site for concept number 2 and then issue it, you know, and then find the operator?
Yeah, one option might be to issue the RFP for concept number 2 and keep it general, and whomever proposes can identify roles and responsibilities. Public entities shall develop the site, they will then operate it. If we give them the flexibility to kind of identify who does what in their proposal. But
Or to put out a solicitation that has both parts and say you can respond to one part or the other, something like that,
Or both,
or both.
yeah, I'd say or both,
That'd be great, right?
yeah, why not?
Yeah, I mean, like Nick's saying, it's almost like if you were doing a development agreement for a large scale property, right? It's gonna be iterative. You wanna bring someone to the table and be able to then have a conversation about what works best for both the public and the private / nonprofit sector to get the ultimate product that you want. And that's what you want to tee up in terms of this.
And didn't Christie already say that there's actually a section that fits better geographically, with the terrain? That might be a better spot for like an 8-9 acre, use within the 45 acres.
I don't know how much we've talked about that or done any analysis on that, but we definitely have to look at, see what specific area makes the most sense.
Okay. And the sooner we do that, that would be good.
And so this RFP, so we can move today, develop the RFP, and then it would come back for approval before we actually issue it.
if you wanted to, or we can see if we can share a draft with you informally, and we can launch as quickly as we can to get it out.
Can I ask one thing?
Yes, Linda.
We met with the service providers and kind of proposed, shared this with them. Christy and Eric did, but we were gonna meet with them again later in 2 weeks to get more feedback from them. And so it feels like putting out an RFP before we get more feedback feels like we're pulling the rug out from what we've told them we're gonna do, that we're really gonna take their input in. And so I would just suggest that, I'm not saying you can't work on the RFP and work on that, but I would suggest that you don't get too finalized in that before we have that next meeting with the service projects. Like, we need to honor our promise to bring them into that thinking of that planning.
Why don't we do a preliminary? Just have something preliminary and you could say, okay, what's your feedback on this? And then listen to them, because we really. Time is money.
Yeah, I agree. I just
Time
want
is
to also
money
make
and
sure
I'm
we
like, this,
honor that
this is
commitment.
taking, yes, a lot of time.
Yeah, we got nothing if nobody doesn't respond to these RFPs. So I really like the idea
Great.
of doing some preliminary work and then workshopping it some more with service providers.
So you said in 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Not this week, but the next week
The
or,
13th.
okay, the 13th. Okay, great. So do we need a motion then?
Yeah, so I will move to direct staff to draft an RFP for the development and operation of what are we calling this, a managed camp or a
Managed camp.
supported / managed camp for the development and operation of a sport / managed camp. Keeping those two parts discrete in terms of ability to respond, and then working with the service provider community in Redmond to ensure that we have the best RFP possible before we put it out for bid.
Okay, so I'll second it. Any further discussion?
I think it just got way too complicated. We're gonna spend way too much money. We should start with a very simple plan, ask people to move. Getting somebody to move from one location to another is a huge monumental task in itself. And if you practice that, we can get some momentum on this. We should have started with concept 1 and worked towards 2 and 3.
We're skipping over 1 because we've already been doing that at Juniper Ridge.
I think we just stepped into the quicksand. It's gonna cost us time and money.
Okay,
I would say that if you look at what has actually worked in homelessness response in our region, what has actually helped
We
to
haven't seen it
reduce-
successful anywhere yet.
the Veterans
We have-
Village has been
we've seen
phenomenal.
so much
Oasis
success.
Village is working.
We have
And-
wildfires starting all around us. We have unsanctioned camping all around us. We're helping 5 and 10% of the people at a time. Yes, it's very successful at the Veterans Village. It's exciting for the people that are in those cabins. Oasis Village, it's wonderful for the people that are in there. We still have 100% problem. We're gonna try to take another small bite out of it. It's gonna be very expensive. It's gonna be quicksand.
And well, the only reason that homelessness has declined in the Redmond area and in the Bend area is because of those very complicated, very expensive solutions that other entities have been willing to step up and work over day after day after day on behalf of our community. So I'm excited for us to potentially launch yet another one of those.
Okay, calling for the vote, Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne,
No.
and the Sheriff Chess. Thank you for coming today. Let us know. Thank you, Christy. Okay, so can we just take a 2-minute break or 5 minute, how about a 5-minute break?
Good presentation.
They're there to provide service. They're gonna talk to them. We did have great. Yeah.
Are you going to the meeting in La Pine tonight?
Yes,
I'll see you there.
I'm gonna go to Redmond first too after this. Yeah, so I'm gonna go zigzag around the county.
Oh,
I
wow.
was just looking at my schedule. If I leave here at 3:30, I'll be just fine.
Okay, that's helpful. Yeah, just to How much time we have? Yeah, what are you doing up in the?
Oh, I'm dropping off an open class baking thing for judging at the fair.
Oh, fun.
It's been a lot. It was years ago and all of a sudden we're like, oh, open class, we should do that someday. What would we do? And I started the conversation with somebody and now we challenge each other. And it's just a simple Italian bread recipe thing, stuff. And I mean, it's just, but you can, in open class, you can put anything in, so
Yeah.
that's fun.
Is it like, olives in this bread or what makes it?
Yeah, it's got tomatoes, garlic, a little bit of pepperoni and cheese. So, but it's not like a pizza. It's just a roll, dinner roll with some flavor to it. So just a fun thing to start with.
Fun. Have you placed in the past?
I've never done it before. That's why the
Oh,
fun
I
thing. It's open class. You just put anything in there. So we'll see.
See how it goes.
So get all my reference stuff together here and cross them. Yeah, we'll have, so yeah, tonight could be real interesting to find. I mean, it's all educational for everybody, I think. You know, there's people that want to just rage against the machines, like, okay, well, who are you gonna get upset at? We're all here, we're all making decisions the best we can.
Well, and Kat said that she was expecting like 200 people.
Yeah.
So. Yeah, I think so. I just wanted to check before we begin. I had emailed with Nick a little bit on Friday, but he allocated about 20 or 45 minutes rather for this item, so we are intending to end by 2:45, so you can
Sure.
start the next item. Would you prefer to end at that time, or is it okay if we dig a little bit into that time?
So I'd like to be hitting the road at 3:30 if possible.
Okay, so wanting to make sure you have enough time to talk about that meeting tomorrow. So yeah, I think
Yeah,
we
we got a
can.
whole hour.
There's 2 executive sessions.
Afterwards? Oh, yeah, we have to
Two
edit.
more.
2 more.
We need
So-
to,
So it
yes.
sounds like I'll try to end this by 2:45, and then if there's remaining items, we could.
We
could
need 15 minutes?
Yeah, I think that's your next item is planned for 2:45 and then
Oh,
the,
sorry.
But let's get started.
all right, let's jump in. So yes, you're already kind of in the swing of things, so I think we can jump in. I wanted to provide some context of just some general comments from the public comments. So we're reviewing chapter 7, natural hazards of the draft Deschutes County 2040 plan. For the record, Nicole Mardell, senior planner. So some of the comments that we received in the record were, I would say, primarily about the narrative. So we received some comments asking to add a disclaimer to some of the climate change related texts, other people wanting additional information on related to climate change. There was some desire to rely only on federal and state agencies for mapping of hazard areas, and also only on those regulations coming from the state or federal bodies to manage development in hazard areas. Otherwise, there was kind of a general desire for a process to expedite the application and kind of how the state level operations work to replace dwellings lost to natural disasters. So more so kind of lobbying for that change rather than local action. And then we had quite a few comments related to wildfire, and I can provide more detail on any of those. And then a couple comments on flooding, primarily related to education outreach and updating our maps, which are done by FEMA. So with that, I welcome any comments from the commissioners. We could jump in and go page by page, or if you had specific items you wanted to jump to, we could do that as well.
Okay.
And stuff on page 7.2 and 7.4. And 7.7. If someone else wants to start, we can.
Yeah, I don't know that I have anything on 7.2.
Okay, what's up?
Okay, so. Before we leave 7.2, then I'll just say, this bullet point on wildfire. Second sentence, these landscapes, however, are now significantly altered due to increased rural development, warmer and dry conditions. And that this phrase, a general lack of large scale treatments due to outdated forest management practices. I think is problematic, resulting in increased event of wildfires that burn more intensely than in the past. I think instead of saying a general lack of large scale treatments, we could just say past forest management practices.
So I'd put something like that, maybe just forest management practices instead of saying past, because I mean, today's forest management practices, yesterday or tomorrow's is what I'm thinking.
Well, I mean, today's forest management practices are actually implementing large scale treatments. It's
Now, when you think of the millions of acres we have in the state and the fact that we have wilderness and we don't stop fires in the wilderness and looking at the map. And seeing how many fires we have going over in the Cascades. And if the wind does what it does in September of 2020, we are gonna be in that same horrible circumstance that we were then. You don't stop a fire when the wind is blowing 70 miles from the northeast.
no, but
So I think it's really unfortunate. Almost 300 mills have closed down since 1980 in the state. We no longer log. We just, we've gotta do something. So large scale.
yeah, I mean, I would say that the Deschutes National Forest has. The Deschutes National Forest in the wildland urban interface surrounding Sun River, Bend, Sisters has treated more of the, a higher concentration of the wildland urban interface within the national forest than probably any other national forests, maybe in the western United States. So I mean, there's certainly more work to do, but I would say that we are doing large scale treatments. And that is part of the reason I feel much safer, much safer than I would otherwise.
Well,
Just
yeah,
figure
get back
it
to
out.
a sentence then specifically.
So. I mean, I would say a lot, but I mean, we could just say, and past forest management practices. Or if you don't like the word past, we could just say forest management practices, that's. But what I would say would instead be, and forest management practices that have altered forest structure, density, and composition.
Yeah, you could
In
write a book on,
particular-
you could write a book on that one sentence, I know.
In particular around cities.
And I'm saying if the wind is blowing, you don't stop the fire. And I'm counting like 22 fires on the other side of the mountain. So if the winds get really nasty from the west, who knows what's gonna happen to Deschutes County? The last time we've got some fires in Kirk County right now. A couple of, maybe one's out completely, but it's a frightening thing.
But I
We
mean,
aren't logging anymore. We've just shut down almost 300 mills.
but the fuels reduction work we've done means smaller ember showers. Shorter flame lengths. I mean, it doesn't, if the wind and the temperatures and the humidity are right, there's nothing you can do, but the behavior of the fire is way less severe than it would have been without the fuels treatment. So, I mean, there's a difference between delivering, a shower, little smattering of embers on the edge of the city of Sisters and a firestorm of embers on the edge of the city of Sisters. I think we've done a very good job.
You make something with that?
Yeah, I heard some support for removing and a general lack of large scale treatments due to outdated forest management practices. And I heard at least two folks were in agreement with replacing that with and forest management practices. But I did hear if there was a consensus on using past forest management practices. Sounds like maybe just forest management practices for that. All right. And if there aren't any other comments, we can move on to page 7.3. Any comments on this page? It's a lot of history.
Yeah, I have no comments on it. So,
So 2 items under drought, what about adding in the middle of that drought paragraph? Many counties in eastern Oregon are experiencing more frequent and severe droughts. How could we say currently experiencing? We don't know what the future's gonna bring. I mean, just a statement of today. It'll be interesting. 40, 50 years from now, it's very different. So just add the word currently.
Currently in front of it, currently experiencing. Yes, because this spring they got so much rain, the grass was up to cows' bellies when fires came in. No, really, and they had to move them off because of the monkey fire.
And then in the bottom corner, what about the CWPPs? I know there was an effort to consolidate.
Yeah, they were all being
So
consolidated.
maybe refer to the CWPP in maybe chapters or something. So let's just update that concept.
Yeah, they, a whole bunch of them were consolidated. And it goes to the next page.
And any comments on page 7.4?
this, under wildfire, the paragraph, the third paragraph, I think is pretty problematic. Talks about forest conditions in the highest elevations of the county. But it doesn't talk about the wildland urban interface, which is what we're most concerned about, because you don't find western hemlock, subalpine fir, and spruce right on the edge of any of our homes. So I'd suggest striking this entire paragraph and replacing with a chapter or with a paragraph that talks about fields conditions, forest conditions in the wildland urban interface. I haven't drafted something up, but unless there's interest in that, I won't bother.
No, that sounds like to me, yeah. More up to date with the science about residential development for our comp plans. Or the human development.
So you want to hear the paragraph?
Sure.
So replacing that paragraph with the wildland urban interface is defined as the area where housing and burnable vegetation meet or intermingle. Deschutes County has seen increased development in the WUI associated with growth in the 4 cities and the rural county, in particular on the edge of cities adjacent to public lands. Public lands in the WUI historically had frequent low-intensity fire, which reduced the density of small trees and brush, making the landscape less likely to produce high-severity fire. Past forest management practices and exclusion of frequent natural low-intensity fire from the landscape result in high fuel loads and high probability of severe fire. Landscapes in Deschutes County that have experienced severe fire often contain dense understory vegetation and brush, which are more susceptible to ignitions and fire spread in hot and dry climates. Following severe wildfire events, forests experience disruption of natural growth progression, which can lead to competition among vegetative species and monoculture species growth. So the rest of this is actually some of the stuff that was in the previous paragraph. Significant efforts have gone into removal of these fuels at the federal, state, and local levels, including notable efforts by neighborhood associations and communities following FireWise guidelines. Home hardening at the individual household level will continue to play an important role in reducing the risk of loss from wildfire events and mitigating the spread of fire between neighboring properties. The 2020 Labor Day fires severely impacted several areas of the state. During those events, house-to-house ignitions amplified the spread of wildfire, causing severe loss of homes and businesses. Home hardening techniques include use of ignition resistant siding and roofing, attic ventilation devices that reduce ember intrusion, and removal of vegetation in the defensible space area surrounding structures on a property. These techniques will be crucial to reduce loss of life and property from these increasing hazard events in and adjacent to the wood.
I think it works. Go ahead and put it in there and then
We'll look at it.
see how things out. Yep.
Great. So just to replace that third paragraph with what Commissioner King provided in the comments, public comments. Any other comments on page 7.4? Otherwise, we can move on to 7.5.
7.5.
Any comments on this page? Okay. Moving on to page 7.6. This is just that similar format, providing some of the key items that came up in discussion among participants. And then we get into the goals and policies on page 7.7 if we wanted to jump there.
Nicole, isn't our code already firewise? Isn't anything you can build in Deschutes County, doesn't it have to be hardened and all those little rules?
That's a good question. I might.
I mean, I
ask
thought it
Will.
already was. I mean, my house was built in 2005 and it had to have all those rules.
Yeah, so I mean, I believe we have a voluntary Firewise construction program,
Voluntary?
voluntary, like through Project Wildfire, but are you familiar if we have any Firewise construction standards in our code for?
So certainly the building code currently, your planning manager, Will Groves, Chair, Commissioners, good afternoon. Certainly, the building code has a variety of things in place already to try to reduce the risk of fire. And then otherwise from that, we have different sort of localized, specialized criteria that are in place. So if you're in a forest zone, for example, you have a requirement to do defensible space. Or if you're in a community that has voluntarily chosen to be Firewise community, your HOA may have obligations. So for example, the tree farm or the West Side Transect Zone have certain specifications. But in terms of something that applies uniformly to everyone, there's not everyone has to be Firewise. That's a status that you can seek as a community. And so, for example, or, Sun River or Black Butte might do certain treatments associated with their properties. And of course, under the wildfire mapping efforts under Senate Bill 80, we anticipate that for those people who are in a high hazard and WUI, that there'll be defensible space and R327, a very specific set of building codes coming their way. In terms of obligations for development, but in terms of a global perspective beyond what's generally the building code today, there isn't something like that.
So you really can build a house in Deschutes County right now without R327?
That's correct.
Okay, so why in
No
2000?
cedar shake roof.
Right.
Why in 2005 then did the people that built my house build it correctly?
Well,
I mean.
it's a great
were you
question. I mean, the first answer would be, I think it would be similar to why did the people who built my house next to the river build it a foot higher? It's because they knew danger was coming.
Right.
Thank you. But they weren't obligated to do it at that time.
And you're still not obligated.
And you're still not.
It's almost
obligated.
20 years.
Yeah, so the only people who are currently obligated to R327 are certain EFU replacement dwellings as well as the ADUs. Of course, you remember that they were subject to that earlier. But we expect that R327 again coming mandatorily to high hazard WUI properties in the future. The notion I think is that the R327 standards, there's a bargain there of increased construction costs versus hopefully reduced risk. And I think what you're seeing the state is cautiously move that forward to more people over time. It's not an insignificant increase in cost. And so I think that's why you haven't seen it globally applied to date.
Okay, thanks, Will.
Yeah, thank
That's page 7.7.
I believe so. We'll go
Okay.
to the goals and policies on page 7.7.
So one really quick, simple one, policy 7.1.2 is referring to high wildfire risk areas, but now they're hazard maps. So just replace that with the word hazard. Policy 7.1.5 deals with wildfire smoke. And I think it would be good for us to have a goal, a policy related to prescribed fire smoke. So I don't know whether the preference would be to weave that in with this same one on wildfire smoke, or to have a whole separate policy on prescribed fire smoke, but I mean, we need prescribed fire, the other 9 months of the year besides summer. In order to have prescribed fire, we also need to, essentially mitigate the impacts of prescribed fire smoke on our communities.
Can we say from trees burning?
I mean, so wildfires opposed to prescribed burns. I guess, yeah, prescribed burns are gonna be trees as much. I was just thinking, can we consolidate it into one by changing the words?
Yeah, if we wanted to consolidate, my recommendation would be work with agency partners to mitigate impacts of increased episodes of poor air quality resulting from wildfires and prescribed burning.
Yeah, that's fine. Support that.
Better.
I'll add that in revision.
And I just have a suggestion on the next page for addition of one more goal, or one more new policy related to seasonal flooding risk associated with the Deschutes River in the Tumalo area. Winter flows are increasing, and there's going to be people who find themselves.
What's the proposed change, sorry?
So add a policy,
Go ahead, okay.
something like conduct outreach and communication relating to seasonal flooding risk associated with the Deschutes River in the Tumalo area.
Sounds kind of specific, as in we have floodplain response and mapping and.
I will, in response to all the to all the flow enhancement work that's happening in Deschutes River, we will see the floodplain change in Tumalo over time. Particularly in the winter. So I think they're already starting to experience this a little bit, but we haven't gotten anywhere near the flow targets for the upper chutes, which during the winter, there's no diversions out of the upper chutes. So whenever you increase the flow of the upper chutes, then the flow below the diversions at the river house.
So 400 CFS plus a winter rainstorm event's gonna make it surge.
Yeah, it probably won't be, well, I mean, it might, I mean.
Well,
you know,
that's why
if you're
flooding is
releasing
the number one thing here, more
If
than
you're-
wildfire.
if you're releasing I guess if you're releasing a kind of set amount out of Wikia. And the little Deschutes joins it is unregulated, there's no dam on the little Deschutes, then you could have. If you have a 300 CFS target for the upper Deschutes, and then the little Deschutes is getting pretty big, then you could have a significant flood event.
Yeah, we see wildly different levels of abuse. But I don't know.
I mean,
I still don't know that's a policy. I mean, that's the reality of the world here. Policy is.
I mean, in the little Deschutes watershed, I mean, the potential for, what they call Pineapple Express. Rain on snow events with climate change, that's getting significantly bigger as well. I know that the little Deschutes was raging for parts of the spring this year. And we could see that more in the future. So this could be not specific to Tumalo too. Because I don't see a lot of policies that are about warning people that they're in flood prone areas.
There. On that
No, it was just,
policy.
yeah, it seems pretty specific. So you have to buy flood insurance. And isn't it going up to like 500 CFS in like 2 years or something? And isn't the Wikia projected never to fill up again because of this conservation plan? Or the spotted frog?
300 CFS in a couple of years,
Well, it's going up to like 500.
very long term, yeah.
Wow.
And the real factor in Wikia filling up again is our precipitation.
No, if they're letting it out all winter, it's never gonna fill up.
Couple of above average rain years or snow years. It will fill up regardless of flow releases.
I was just quoting one of the water masters, so.
So, just for the chair and commission, so we do have a goal that talks generally about, developing programs to inform the public about increased risk from natural hazards. It's correct, we don't have one specifically related to flooding at this point. So you could add one in related to flooding potentially for unmapped areas. Just because I don't think we typically conduct outreach to those property owners right now. Or the action plan is another option. So we will be coming back to you with the action plan, which will inform future work plans. So if you felt the policy suggested by Commissioner Chang were too specific, could be an option to add that in the action plan.
That might be.
Right, add that to the action plan. Right. Any other comments on this page or that's the last page in the chapter, so any other comments on this chapter?
7111. 7111A, ensure that land use activities do not aggravate, accelerate, or increase the level of risk from natural hazards. There's a proposal to drop that. It's just very big broad statement.
Apologize, 7111A.
Yeah, 7111. Yeah.
Yep.
So let's say, just cross-reference back into the document from the owners, builders association, the farm folks. It was just a proposal to maybe drop that. As I read it, I mean, can we get grounded in what ensure, what would that look like if somebody came in and said, I want to, build a house? Well, let's take a while and ensure that this activity doesn't aggravate or accelerate something. It's just the words.
Yeah, that's actually carryover language from our 2010 plan. And so I think generally the intent is to try to be aware of hazard areas and mitigate development impact, but if you don't like the specific language.
Which is kind of vagueness of it is what I would support, thinking that, oh, well. That.
I mean, we've heard from a lot
Couple
of people,
chapters.
that they don't want land use to aggravate wildfire risk to our communities.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
you could always map something to it, but I'm just saying it's another one of those kind of gotchas and some of the land use stuff where it's like, well, if nothing else fits, let's pull this one out. Well, map everything to that doesn't fit somewhere. So I just get more specific. I mean,
This has been in the comp plan for 10 years. Do you know of any specific regulations that have come out of it that are?
it's just a proposal to remove.
I don't support that. 3 votes.
Really haven't had much to do with the floodplain the last 6 years that I've been working. I remember there was somebody down in Laurel Bridge, somebody had a floodplain issue that really wasn't a floodplain, and so I know it's a nightmare if you have it. If you're zoned with it and you really aren't, so They vote.
So do you support taking that item A out or not?
It was there 10 years ago.
In our current plan.
I don't know, it seems like we have very little floodplain.
And it
I think it's just a big generic.
Yeah.
also, it's also relevant from a fire perspective.
Yeah, that one relates more generally to natural hazards, not specific to floodplain.
Yeah, it's just a big general statement.
Okay, it's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So are we good then?
I believe we're good. Thank you very much, commissioners, for the speed run today. I really appreciate your time and all the revisions. So I'll return next Monday to discuss chapter 11, unincorporated communities and destination resorts, and chapter 5, natural resources. Just as a reminder, that's our last scheduled meeting. So at the end of that meeting, we can discuss if you feel comfortable moving forward to kind of the vote on the final document, or if you'd like to see the full revised draft. But we can have that discussion then.
Okay, great. So next Monday, and then we'll have the draft. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. Thanks, Nicole. Thank you again for coming back from Sisters. We're so glad you did.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Okay, so we need to go back into executive then after other items.
You have one other topic, number 9.
Oh, the feasibility
This
for
is just
tomorrow night.
a very brief update as you prepare for tomorrow evening. Jen, do you jump in or do
I
it?
can jump in, sure.
Yeah.
Jim Patterson, Strategic Initiatives Manager. So, excuse me, I have coughed a little bit from the smoke. So as you were all forwarded emails from me last week, continuing to see a lot of citizen engagement around this topic and for emails. And I just wanted to touch base before we go into tomorrow's meeting with this set agenda. Specifically, the citizen engagement has been coming with very detailed questions for Echo Northwest. I sat down and met with Mark about 2 weeks ago from Echo Northwest to ask him to put together a presentation based on the 2 topics that we had discussed, which was an update on financials, looking at a campground at 50, 100, or 150 RVs, as well as providing an update on supply and demand, market supply and demand for campgrounds in the county. So I actually just got his presentation about an hour ago. That's what he was working on. We have these very technical questions that have been coming through, I think, pretty in-depth, including with one participant doing his own financial analysis of the site at Fort Thompson Lane. And so I just wanted to touch base to see if we want to stick with the agenda that we have, which has Echo Northwest presenting for about 10 to 12 minutes on those 2 very specific topics, and not having a Q&A specifically with Echo and the community. The format was really designed for the community to engage directly with you commissioners. And that's how we've set the agenda and published the agenda. So just wanted to touch base with that format and make sure that that's how we want to stay with it. In addition, we've invited their 5 partner agencies, have confirmation from 2 for sure, a 3rd one tentative, and haven't heard back from 2 others, but kind of with the concept and letting them know that if there's questions for any agency, possibly including Echo, from the community members, and you as commissioners want to engage that agency into that discussion, that they would be available for that. So that I'll stop talking and turn it back over to you, see if you have any input based on kind of the new emails that have been floating around.
So does Echo Northwest want to answer these questions?
So I sent them to Mark with an email that basically is similar to the email that you were BCC'd on to the community members, saying that's not what we asked Echo to present on. We asked on the 2 topics. Not only that, we're trying to be very cautious of not having Echo step outside of the original scope of work and do any additional contract. We consider their contract completed with the county and paid for, and they are, Mark's actually on vacation in Ohio with his family and going to be calling in for this 3 hours as a volunteer and not billing the county for that. So I let Mark know that we've had those questions and shared them with him, but did not specifically ask or direct him to address those in his presentation. And looking at his presentation, they're not.
It's really
specifically.
5, isn't it 5:30 to 8?
Mhm.
Okay, it's not 3 hours then.
2.5, sorry.
Okay, I mean, I'm just like 8:30. Okay,
I did not add additional 30 minutes. into it.
Can you just repeat for me, so like the two things that they're gonna cover, these different size increment campgrounds, and then what was the second thing?
The market supply and demand for recreational campgrounds in the county.
So I support him just doing his presentation, understanding, yeah, he doesn't need to take a lot of the focus, just basically, and I think I said this before, you know, introduction of what he thought the product he was gonna create, what he did create, and some of the charts and graphs as presented. I support, keeping it simple.
Keeping- okay.
Yeah.
I would as well, and I also want us to be willing to say to people that we are not at a build, not build decision point. We are at a do we do some additional analysis and planning or not?
Yeah.
Point. And a lot of the questions that people are asking about kind of the financial model, I mean, those can be addressed in a next phase of planning and analysis. I don't think we have to have the answers right now.
And just for follow-up to that too, originally Ken Arthur was the first person who sent that detailed question list. And I actually spoke with him on the phone about a week ago and also described that, like, if there was to move forward, it would potentially be with looking at a site plan and an updated pro forma or financial model. Like, this was just a very, that was just one small component of the camping feasibility study. That's not what we were digging into. So that answer was given to them, but
Right.
that email followed up after that conversation. So
And what did Chip say?
that was Ken.
Arthur,
He's the one who responded back with the attachment of his own analysis. So. And I believe he's also been in touch with Jeff.
We just want the board to be aware that that we received these questions. We worked on
Yeah.
a carefully crafted message that we cannot confirm that these questions will be answered tomorrow night. Echo will be there, but the
Yeah.
point was this conversation between the board and the community, which is what they asked for. And we would be hesitant to have the board even defer to Echo during any of the community conversations, because then it could just go down a rabbit hole of, what can you elaborate? And all of a sudden that 30 minutes evaporates and you haven't had, it's been a conversation between a couple of people and the consultant as opposed to them and you, which is what we really were aiming for the agenda to be.
And to follow up with that, when I talked to Margaret, I specifically said it's not gonna be a Q&A with Echo because that wasn't
what we,
Right.
yes.
So it sounds like we're all on the same page, so we'll stick with that. And that response has been given to those, you are all CC'd on our BCC'd on those responses, so.
Great.
Great,
I mean, and can we just say, what we were just talking about, we did a feasibility study. We are not at a build, not build decision point. We're at a point where we're trying to decide whether to do more planning and analysis. Just say that right up front at the very beginning, so that,
one of you will say that, or you are wanting me to say? it?
however,
I mean, that's been
I'm happy to-
communicated
I'm
to
happy
that
to say
group
it.
through me too,
Okay.
but.
okay, but I mean,
Yeah,
you
maybe one of the
people read,
commissioners.
sometimes
I
people read
suggest-
emails, sometimes they don't,
Right.
okay.
Okay, that's it.
I just think
Great.
making sure that that's very clear to people at the very beginning is gonna be helpful.
And then you probably will have to repeat it throughout the evening. Undoubtedly.
I'm sure.
And I was drafting up talking points just so you could review the format of the evening, so I could include those in the draft talking points. Or you could just include those at the beginning of each of your group discussions, which everyone will be able to hear.
Okay.
That work? Okay, great. I had one other item. Do we want to do that now or later? The letter from High Desert Museum.
Oh, yeah, you have one. Okay, I added two. Yes.
Oh, you got it.
We have one of
I already reformatted it.
two. Perfect.
Okay.
Okay. Two quick letters. Thank you.
So we have a request, a letter of support from High Desert Museum. They're applying for a Pacific Power Electric Mobility Grant. Are looking for potential support.
We need to apply for the homeless camp. A mobility grant. Does that sound right?
I'm not.
This is particularly electric
Central.
mobility for, so previous projects included like EV charging stations at COCC.
They submitted this draft letter for the
Yeah.
board's consideration to support their grant.
I might make it shorter by removing the second paragraph. And I mean, if there's something to keep in there, but it's to say, when I was looking at it, I'm like, oh, I just make this a little shorter. That was just my thought.
Happy to make any edits. We have a little bit more time than we have for most letters of support, so we can do whatever we need done.
Since it fits on one page, I don't think we have to take that second paragraph out. but Not opposed to it, but.
She didn't, so I talked to Dana briefly today because I had a question for her. But I went and looked on Pacific Power's website and it looks like it's not due to August 30th.
Okay.
But Dana didn't have the actual time frame in her head. I told her I'd get back to her later on this
Sounds
afternoon.
like an electric delivery van or something too.
Thoughts? Edits?
Works for me. Capital B and Evo.
Darn it all.
Just pops up once in a while.
It's because I take them from the other, I need to like delete my other drafts that have errors in them.
Yes,
Not necessarily, okay, great. So if the board supports it, we don't need a motion, it's just a nod of support the letter.
All three signatures.
All good.
did you see the sales numbers on electric vehicles? They're way down.
Not,
The prices are actually being dropped. Interesting that they think they need to get one.
Well, they're gonna get a free one. Pacific Power.
Yeah, I know, it's gonna be free.
so do we want all three, Commissioner Dare, do you want your signature on there too?
It's okay, I just find it interesting.
Other than
So
that,
Not-
yes, okay,
Not
so
as popular as they.
I'll change the B and then we'll circulate that. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, yeah.
And then just one more.
Yeah, this is the letter to the governor about the Gales property. At the discussion last week among the board, Commissioner Chang suggested that we ask the governor's office to kick in the money it would take to rezone, the rezone application. I did not incorporate that into the draft letter, that was routed for signatures. So Commissioner Chang flagged that. I added in 2 sentences for consideration on page 2.
And for it to be a like bolded.
Well,
Bolded thing, but,
I'll unfold it to show the change.
okay.
So it would not, if the board approved it, it would not, I would unfold it.
and did we vote on a version last week and this is change or?
Well, the board voted on a version with proposed changes and that.
Oh, now we're just finalizing it, okay.
Whether or not this part, that was
Yeah,
unclear. to
got
me.
it.
I asked for that change. Thank you. I would support that letter.
I'll support it.
Where did we get the 20,000? I mean, with lawyers and everything, you're thinking this is gonna.
Peter estimated it, he said 20 to 25.
CDs.
That's just the
Yeah.
fees. That doesn't include necessarily the amount of it's land use attorney time it's gonna take to draft the application. So we could ask for a little bit more, but
I would say ask for more. You're gonna ask for 20,000 from a government that spends 57 million on Deloitte. And they're, yeah, like 20,000, that's a drop.
We could ask for 25, and then if the costs exceed the application cost, then they can apply that to their
Right.
attorney's fees to help prepare the application or something.
I just. It seems like a pittance that we're asking.
Right.
Okay, so is there a motion then? I'd say move it to 25. Is there a motion?
support.
Second.
Well, wait, so, okay, motion, move approval of, letter to, Governor Kotek, requesting assistance with, implementing the managed camp at the Gales property. With a cost, estimated cost, request for $25,000.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion? Commissioner, Chang,
Yes.
Commissioner Vaughn,
Yes.
and Chair votes yes. So we'll get that soon,
Yes.
like today maybe. All right. So now are we going to executive?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, Kim.
Yes, thank you. Deschutes County Board of County Commissioners will now convene an executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660. The specific authorization for this executive session is ORS 192.6602D, which allows the board to meet in executive session in order to discuss labor negotiations. The board will also be convening as the governing body of Deschutes County 911. Separate and apart from that, they will also be discussing a matter as the governing body of the county under 2E, which is for real property negotiations. Designated staff and the media are allowed to remain during the executive session. However, the media may only report that the board met in executive session and the identified basis for meeting in executive session. Recording devices are not permitted. No final decisions will be made in executive session, and at the conclusion of the executive session, we will open the doors and invite the audience to return to the room.
Okay.